History is an odd subject. On the one hand, it's so far away, and yet it is still so close to home. Take, for example, the Norman conquest of England in 1066. Though on the surface, the fact that William the Conqueror was able to usurp the English throne 1,000 years ago doesn't seem all that relevant, unless you consider that the current monarch of Great Britain is his direct descendant, and that we ask for beef burgers instead of cow. Or maybe the crisis of the 14th century, when Europe was in the grasps of the Black Death, a pandemic so large and terrifying that before it subsided, 1 in 2 of every person in the European world was dead. Though 700 years ago, we are still feeling the effects of this monumental shift in how Europe organised itself, both politically and socially. Through this crisis, we see Europe laying the foundations for an economy no longer based on land or serfdom as we are so used to thinking of the medieval world, and instead driving for a more goods-based economy with a healthy and wealthy middle class of merchants and professionals. This class would, over time, fund expeditions to the Far East in search of spices, a trade that would make their nations, if we can call them nations, that's a whole other thing, richer than they ever had been before. This amassed wealth would, with the discovery of steam power and the massive reserves of coal underneath Britain, fund the greatest expansion of an economy of all time, the Industrial Revolution, which tore down social barriers harder and faster than even the crisis of the 14th century. No longer was the average Brit working in a field to make enough food to survive. They now delved deep into the earth in search of coal, or sweated in the factories of London, Manchester or Birmingham. Capitalism, as we know it today then, was not born out of intuition but sheer dumb luck, from an accident started centuries before with the greatest plague of all time. But even in its infancy, this capitalist ethos would come under attack from all angles. One such critic from Germany, or rather the Kingdom of Prussia, because there's not a Germany yet, would write a book so influential that it is still one of the most read books of all time to this day. Karl Marx and his Communist Manifesto. So influential was this book, and Marx's others, including Das Kapital, that they would influence Vladimir Ilyich Lenin and his Bolshevik party to overthrow one of the most powerful empires of all time, the Russian Empire. After a bitter civil war, Lenin and his Bolsheviks would form in its place the Soviet Union, which would in time come into direct ideological conflict with the United States, the two engaging in a 50-year standoff where they threatened each other with total atomic annihilation. The collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s, along with its sphere of influence, signalled a new age where the American ideology of liberal democracy married with an unrestricted or unregulated market ruled the world. And then, on September 11th, 2001, the World Trade Center was attacked by the very man the US had funded in his struggle against the Soviets in their 1979 to 1989 invasion of Afghanistan, Osama bin Laden. Now, what I hope I've made clear to you is that history, no matter how far away in terms of distance or time, still has an effect on us today. Now, I know what I described wasn't the complete picture. History is not a straight line like that. I mean, I've not mentioned India or China or Africa or anywhere in South America. I've not spoken about Mao Zedong's Long March or the French Revolution, the rise of fascism in the 20s and 30s, the First World War, the Second, the British and French empires, their decolonisation, or the Emancipation Proclamation. To tell a complete history of the world is not a task any one person could undertake, but that all of these events put together resulted in our world is important. But why? Why would anyone want to explore the past? Of course the world we live in is the result of past events, but why would anyone bother looking at them in any sort of detail? Surely our efforts are better spent looking at the issues of today and trying to address them in our own way. For example, how is reading about the medieval world going to help us to address the inevitable boom of unemployment that automation is going to bring in? Or how's reading about the institutions of the Holy Roman Empire going to help us decide who to vote for? Is history useful? And if it is, how?
Good question.
That is the question we will try to answer over the course of the next few videos, if there is at all an answer to it. So join me next week, where we'll be looking at Polybius and Herodotus, two of the oldest historians in the Western tradition. Until then, guys, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.